I think the news is welcome. It's very interesting. And I think it signals American determination to follow up on some of the promises made during the U.S.-Africa summit, the one that was held last month. I think the worry among many observers of U.S.-Africa relations at that time was that, yes, that's a very good event. It was needed. Africa and the United States needed to come to the table, but what's going to come after that? This news that all these important personalities in an American context are going to visit Africa at different times throughout the year signals that America is ready to put its money where its mouth is. From an African perspective, that's an excellent sign. I think there is also something to take away from the fact that this is also coming on the back of the visit to Africa by the Chinese foreign minister. It seems very clear that the United States doesn't want to be left behind in what is becoming a very interesting struggle to capture African hearts and minds. So that's, I think, what is going on here. It's very welcome from an African perspective.
And Doctor, Chinese trade with Africa is about 4 times that of the United States. And Beijing has become an important creditor by offering cheaper loans, often with, opaque terms and collateral requirements.
You just mentioned that China is offering opaque loan terms, and I don't think this is what the United States should be doing. China is there are no strings being attached to the loans that China is offering African countries. And as you and I know, those loans will come due at some point, and those countries will become heavily indebted. The United States doesn't want to ape that model. And here's the second thing. The United States has been criticized for attaching strings to its own loans. For instance, to say that we're going to give you support, but we're insisting that you follow the rule of law and you protect civil society and you don't throw people in jail. I think it's extremely important that the United States continues to be identified with that model. I think this is what is going to work in the long term. Focusing on the short term will be focusing on doing what exactly China is doing. My sense is that model is going to be discredited in the foreseeable future. And when that happens, the United States will be in a position to strengthen ties with African countries. Because in insisting on human rights, on the rule of law, on protection of civil society and democracy, the United States will be doing exactly the same thing that people in Africa want from their leaders. The United States ought to think long-term and not short-term.
Dr. Yellen's visit is intended to deepen long-standing U.S. ties to African nations and offer sustainable, high-quality investments. And I just want your take on this. She has criticized Beijing, now the world's largest creditor, for not moving quickly to restructure the debt of poor countries in Africa.
Yes, it's okay to do that. So that it's okay to criticize China for doing that. Let's think more carefully about this. If China is signing agreements, is entering into agreement with African countries that are injurious in the short and in the long term to the interest of those countries, I don't think we should be blaming China. I think we should be looking at the terms of those agreements and asking ourselves why African countries, why African leaders are signing agreements that are not in their own best interest. I don't think this is China's fault. I'm going to suggest that we look closely at the leadership in Africa and ask why in 2023, several African countries continue to sign non-disclosure agreements that do not work into their own long-term interests. I'm not going to hold China responsible for this. On the contrary, I'm going to hold African leaders responsible for this.